first and foremost, the agenda, we're going to talk about servant leadership. It's a concept that people, you may or may not have heard that term, but a lot of people like to use that terminology, but they don't really know what it means. A lot of people misrepresent what servant leadership really is. Next item, we're going to be talking about how to manage a team's performance. And that goes into accountability and also coaching and having crucial conversations. And then the last item is a formal and informal leadership. Most people who's taken MBA classes or general business classes know about that, but it's important to touch on that as well, because it's important because every organization does have its informal leaders, and it's important to be aware of them and to get to know them and try to get them on your team if you're trying to implement change. So first and foremost, 7 pillars of servant leadership. There was a book by Robert Greenleaf, I believe was his name, back in 1970. It read kind of more like a textbook. Honestly, it was a little dry, but big picture, he pointed out 7 pillars, 7 main concepts of servant leadership. And I won't read through each of these individually because I have a slide for each individual of these pillars. But these together are major aspects that are necessary for servant leadership to be successful. The first one is being a person of character. Obviously, that goes into having integrity, demonstrating humility, and what that means is being willing to admit whenever you're wrong, whenever you are not the whenever you are just incorrect about something. Don't always try to be the smartest person in the room. Actually care about your people, and focusing on developing people. That's actually very important, is having a passion to help others, and by doing so, that's actually how you're going to learn more about yourself and about leadership in general as well. And putting people first is the second pillar. And heck, we're all in this program because it's a mentoring program, right? And that's one of the key items there, is developing people, having a servant's heart, and actually caring for your people. I personally, I discovered about roles that I wanted and roles that I liked or roles I did not like. And I've learned that I really thrived and enjoyed being in a leader of people and not necessarily a program manager. Though I was successful at program management, I found that I missed having people come up to me and say, hey, I'm in a bind with this or whatever, and helping people out, helping develop people. And that's a major item right there, is you kind of have to be a people person, and or have a desire to be a people person. And actually that's also a learned behavior that you can develop as well. The third item is actually being a skilled communicator. Uh, Obviously that takes back into listening and speaking effectively, but the thing is don't just sit there and talk just to hear yourself talk. It's all about listening and having an art about communicating. Don't cut people off. Actually, try to learn more about email etiquette. I have one employer who, all of his emails, he ended the emails with exclamation points, and his emails were all capital letters. And everyone just thought he was shouting it all the time, and he just never bothered to learn how to communicate electronically. Again, these are pillars that some people have naturally strengths in, and some people, they have to work to develop them. So if you're not a skilled communicator, don't let that hold you back. Grab a couple books, start observing people. Whenever you, one of the things I do whenever I see an executive standing up on a stage or anyone presenting, I like to sit back and also watch how they present. What is their body language? How are they enunciating? How do their slides look? Stuff like that, so that we can actually learn about them in addition to learning the topic. I think that's a very valuable thing, and to always be learning, always trying to raise the bar on ourselves. The Next item is being a compassionate collaborator. This is where we are working to build teams, actually negotiating conflicts, trying to be the bridge builder between organizations and also within your own organization. Everyone knows that one person that's always smoothing things out between people, and it's important to be able to work on that. That's both a strength and a weakness for myself. And the weakness part of it is I'm kind of like a little papa bear with my people, to where um, if I sense that someone's going after them or whatever, I I don't really collaborate. I work on protecting my people more, and that can be a blind spot as well. But also on the flip side, one of the biggest compliments I got from someone that used to work for me was that I had very high standards, but also I was the first one to say thank you whenever the job was done and throughout the job. So, um, it's so important to make sure we say thank you, because it has been proven, even though we all appreciate our paychecks, we don't go to work just for a paycheck. We want to feel like we're adding value to something. And saying thank you is a major item for that. And again, it's not just saying the words thank you. It's how do you show your appreciation? How do you show that you care for your people? Now, especially if you do the math of how many hours we spend with our teams compared to being at home, that's a major item there. And we naturally need to nurture that relationship. The other one item, and I'm going to slightly digress. Uh, this servant leadership concept is not only for work; it's also for outside activities outside of work, PMI, for your family, church. Uh, if you're coaching a basketball team, whatever, leadership can be in any group. So don't think that we're talking about just work here. It can bleed through all aspects of our lives. The fifth pillar is actually having foresight. This is being the visionary person, the guy who's the guy or female that's wanting to drive the organization to a higher goal, to raise a standard. If anyone's ever read the book Good to Great, you know, he meant the author mentions the concept of a BHAG, which is a big, hairy, audacious goal. And by identifying a BHAG and setting the plan for that and driving the actions for that, that's really indicative of this pillar right there. Don't be afraid to dream big, and take the decisive action. Don't take unnecessary risks, but it is important to know what the organization could become. The next item is being a systems thinker. And this is actually an interesting concept here. And until I read this, I didn't think of being a systems thinker should be associated with servant leadership. But it is interesting to think about here. Okay, so being a systems thinker is someone who thinks and acts strategically, leading change effectively. Uh, they always have, they're the ones that are swimming like a duck, to where they're looking so graceful over the water. The 4-hour work week type people, to where they just built the system to where they're not stressing about things as much. Of course, it doesn't take away all your stress, but you're able to manage your work day so much better if you come up with a system of dashboards, KPIs, and tools and processes. Um, it wasn't until recently that I ran into someone who was the antithesis of being a systems thinker, that I realized how much this really does align with servant leadership, because the individual just pretty much was a bull in a china shop. He would walk out to the shop and just, hey, we have to ship this unit, we have to ship this product, and pretty much like, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And he was able to ship that product, but then everything else was miserable for the next 2 weeks afterwards to mop up the mess. And after I saw this individual in action, that's whenever the light bulb finally clicked on me regarding this pillar. It's important to learn how to develop systems and tools for that. And over the years, I kind of came up with various techniques for that. Obviously, every organization is going to have a different type of system that needs to be developed. And also every manager is going to like a different type of system. But I always think of it as different type of levers to pull whenever I'm managing and whenever I'm just doing my day-to-day work. So building the system is actually how you get out of reactive mode and into strategic mode. And that's important. So you have time to think of the BHAGs and items like that. If you're sitting there fighting forest fires left and right, you're never going to be able to see how big the fire really is or how big the forest is. So it's important to be able to dip down into the details, but also being able to have visibility of the entire picture. The last pillar is leading with moral authority. And this is all, big picture, having high standards, accepting and delegating responsibility, sharing a culture and creating a culture of accountability, and just being respect worthy. And whenever people think of moral authority, a lot of people instantly think religious in items such as that. No, it's just about being someone who's trustworthy, someone who's going to be respectful, and that's one of the key items with servant leadership. One concept regarding servant leadership, and I've seen a lot of organizations try to implement it. A lot of organizations say, "Hey, I read this book. We're going to be servant leaders now," and they stand up on stage and talk about servant leadership, and then they're surprised 3 months later, 4 months later, a year later, whenever nothing has changed. And the big reason is you can't implement it with just a few memos and standing up on a stage with a microphone. It actually is a cultural change, and it takes a lot of work on ourselves to implement. If you happen to see an organization where they're all saying, "Hey, we're servant leaders," in my mind, maybe it's speaking out of term here, but I view that as an alarm bell, because really it's individually driven by the leaders to be servant leaders. The concept is important to be taught, but the action part of it is up to the individual leaders to really do it the right way. It cannot be dictated upon from high. A lot of studying, I believe all of us in the program are in this mentoring program for a reason, and that is because we're trying to better ourselves and also better our communities. And a lot of studying and practice comes with that. And one of my nerdy hobbies that my wife laughs at me about is I'm always reading a business book, and everything from business strategy, management theory, to office politics, you name it, and biographies also. I'm always trying to improve myself. And I think that's one of the key items, is always staying hungry. The moment that we feel that we have it mastered, that's whenever we really should be asking ourselves, do we really have it mastered? Because no one should ever feel like a guru of leadership. And if so, well, then we're putting a blind spot up to ourselves. It's like water. You can't hold it in your fingers forever. And obviously, like I mentioned, everything begins with the individual. It's good to learn the concepts of it and build the foundations of it, but it cannot be dictated upon as well. And the other item is, obviously, once all of the groups of individual leaders have that mentality, that's whenever it's servant leadership. And only then will the organization recognize it. And what I mean by that is the organization will not be a servant leadership type of organization if they're standing up advertising to everyone, "Hey, we're servant leaders, blah, blah, blah." It just happens gradually. It's the slow cultural change. It's the erosion of the bad practices, and then the growing of the better and normal practices as well. So barriers to remove. I apologize. Give me 1 second here. Okay. So one of the concepts that I always say to my people is, I'm here as a leader to remove barriers. A lot of managers and leaders in general get promoted because they were the best engineers, they were the best sales agents, they were the best project managers or whatever, and they moved up, and they feel like the best engineers feel like they have to be doing all of the engineering work. In all reality, they need to be organizing the processes and removing barriers for their teams to be successful. So it's a different concept here. Some barriers may be training and development. I'm actually in the process of rolling out a new training program for my organization because there hasn't been one. Instead, they've had a lot of quality issues, and everyone's been going up to them and saying, "Hey, you have, so many quality issues, technicians. Why are you messing up?" Well, no one bothered to sit back and train the people, and that's a major item that a lot of people forget about. Is training is a barrier unless it's a robust system and it's done right. Then it actually turns it into an enabler. And training can both be technical and also other topics. In addition to training development, we all know about leadership development training. Emotional intelligence is an interesting concept, and I've been teaching some people, just reviewing some of the information that I've learned through the years on that as well. And career development is another item that's an interesting topic for training and development. Resources is a barrier if you don't have enough. You always hear, we don't have enough people to do this, or I don't have enough time. There's not enough hours in the day. That's where this comes from, and that's a barrier that we need to be addressing for our people. Same thing for planning. It goes back to being in that knee-jerk reaction. If we're systematic, we can actually see. I always use the terminology, I'm helping you see around corners, because I know what's happening. You can't build the unit unless you get the parts, you can't get the parts unless you order them 6 months ahead. So planning is important, and we're all project managers, so we all know, planning is more important than anything else for that. Tools and procedures is an interesting concept as well. It comes down to the fundamentals. If your people don't have the right tools, and that can be either hand tools, or it can be spreadsheets, it can be templates, and it could be financial spreadsheet templates as well. And guidelines and procedures and processes are important to think of whenever there are barriers. Whenever people are struggling, that might be one of the items. Again, this is not a holistic list, but it's just pretty much anything that causes your people to struggle is a barrier that should be looked at. For servant leadership, big picture, it's all about driving the culture of accountability, but in a softer way, walking the walk. Don't just sit there and bark at people. It's all about making sure that we are willing to do what we're asking our people to do as well. And I already talked about removing barriers. And again, it does not happen overnight. Cultural change, if it happens overnight, it's not going to stay. It's more dictated upon. Real implementation of cultural change is a gradual progression, a gradual transition to where you want to go. And it's important to study and read on different topics of how to manage cultural change if that's actually a necessary item for your organization. And there's lots of different theories and practices behind that. On the topic of accountability comes accountability and leadership. Like I mentioned earlier, we're always on stage. Actions do speak louder than words. If we walk by someone that's doing something that's not safe, we just keep on walking. We're actually saying that it's okay. Even if, we stand up on stage for 10 hours and say, safety is number one, blah, blah, blah. The very second we walk by an unsafe situation without addressing it, all of that speaking goes out the window, because they're like, okay, this guy says one thing and he does another. Our behaviors matter, and we actually set the stage. I always tell my people, you're always on stage. People are watching you. I know years ago, whenever I first became a supervisor, I was surprised everyone all of a sudden knew my name, and I was like, what's that all about? You know, and it was because you're on stage just overnight, and it's important for that. I don't know if any of y'all's ever seen this a topic for it's called the accountability ladder. It's from the Oz principle. But big picture, below the red line is where it's all victim behaviors. Above the red line is accountable behaviors. Victim behaviors are things that happen to you. Accountable behaviors are things that happen because of you. The very bottom rung is where you don't even know what's going on. You know, that's just you know, you're pretty much blind and oblivious to what's going on. The next rung on being not accountable is blaming others, and that's obviously not very accountable. You're saying like, oh, what Sherry's fault because she never did this, and making personal excuses, and I can't, and hoping and waiting, and it just progresses on up to where and eventually you're embracing the issues, you're finding solutions, and then you're actually driving the solutions, you're driving the actions to make things happen. And you're not always at the top. We all go up and down, but this is actually where it's important to be on the top four rungs of that ladder. Having crucial conversations. Big picture, I won't go through all of this in too much detail, because I believe we have like 10 more minutes. But being candid with your people, but whenever you know you're about to have a personnel performance discussion, you can't just go right in and say, hey, you screwed up. It's important to make sure that we think the discussion through. And also sometimes the issue happened because of ourselves. So we need to look at this aspect with it. We need to look to ourselves. You control you. Don't just justify your own unhealthy behavior. And refusing the difficult choice. This is making sure that we try to turn into a team here. It's not a me versus you. We're all one team. And then mentally walk through the discussion. What are they about to say? Why do we think? Try to put yourself in their shoes. And then where should the conversation be held? Should it be on the factory floor, or should it be in a private conference room, or whatever? Make sure you have time for that discussion. Knowing your audience. I cannot remember the name of the book, but the book talked about 4 different types of people, and 4 different types of personality. There is a dog, a crocodile, a beaver, and a tiger. The dog just wants to be appreciated. It just wants to be patted on its head and said, you're a good boy. The crocodile it's going to go at your throat regardless. It's the one that likes to heckle. The beaver just wants to be left alone. It does not want praise. It just wants to be left alone. Give me the job and I'll get it done. And the tiger is the one that wants to be recognized, but it's also going to do a great job. It's part of the team. These are the ones that want the appreciation and the recognition. And these are also typically, a lot of them are the informal leaders of the group, and how you approach them are different for each one. So think of it as that, and think, if you're about to have a crucial discussion, what type of person does that fit into? Because you'll be addressing them differently based off of that. How do we show respect is another item, is listening. I won't go through this in too much detail, but you go to a doctor's office and you try to tell your symptoms, the doctor will interrupt you on average after only 17 seconds without fully hearing what your issue is. And the reason why is because we're thinking, almost 6 times as fast as we're talking. All right. Looks like we have more time. That's awesome. Uh, so the last item for having a crucial discussion is gaining alignment on the next steps, ensuring the employee accepts the actions to address the next steps, and make sure that you take some of the actions yourself. Because some of the actions are, hey, you know what, I could have done better at this or whatever. We do need to improve the training. We need, and identify some barriers that you should be addressing as well. And then make sure you actually record those actions, meet up with everyone, and follow up on the actions as well. The last topic is formal and informal leadership. There are two types of leadership. There is formal and informal, or it can be both. Formal power is, sorry, my wife just walked in here. Formal power can be determined by just a range of rewards, but big picture, that's the person who has the title. You get formal authority by the title given to you. And that's where you fit on the org chart. If you're in the military, that's the rank that you have. Informal leadership is it's pretty much how much your team trusts you and why. Examples of sources from informal power can come from, are you the go-to person? Are you the resident expert at the given item? If so, people will come up to you for guidance. Having a strength of network. Everyone knows that one person who knows whose hand to shake to get things done. If something's stuck in bureaucracy, they know who to call to actually get things taken care of. Charisma and character, just a general smooth person, the likable guy. Everybody loves Raymond, right? That's kind of where that ties into. And actually, here one previous item, I forgot that this takeaway right here. It's essential. The reason why I wanted to throw in this formal and informal power is, if you're trying to make a major change, make sure you think about the informal leaders and get them on board first, because they are the ones that's really going to get the rest of the organization on board. There are a couple of books that I recommend reading. Simon's Leaders Eat Last. Another one is Execution, the Discipline of Getting Things Done. That actually goes through a lot of crucial conversations type stuff. It touches on the third book, which is Crucial Conversations, but it also goes into different management techniques. How do you keep your thumb on the pulse? How do you build your system? How do you track people's performance? So these items are really good books to be reading. I will be sending the slides out, and it will have these books on them. But I just wanted to show you these are 3 books, and at the end of each of our discussions, I wanted to show you a couple of the books, because part of it, if you really want to keep on learning, is keeping on reading different books. And if you have a long commute, get an audiobook. That's what I used to do all the time. Whenever I had an hour commute, I went through so many books, and I definitely loved it. Larry Bossidy, for the Execution, the Discipline of Getting Things Done, was actually a runner-up to be Jack Welch's successor, and he ended up becoming the CEO of 3M, and turned that organization into what it is now. So that's it for the presentation. Just in general, any questions or comments or concerns?